Hey, Lauren, we are back. Co-Creation Nation. We are at it again. Another podcast. How is my partner in crime, Lauren Hall?
Troy Blankenship, so good to see you. Hey, friends. Thanks for listening. Co Creation Nation, a podcast to bring true science and fun and stories. All of it is for you, our nation out there, Team Nation. Thanks, guys, for listening.
Yes. So we're going to get into the relatable science of
Hmm.
hypnosis today. And it's funny because Lauren and I were just, before we started here, we were just kind of goofing off and just having a fun time explaining some of the science, behind hypnosis, and also some of the stories that we've had from, our past clients and how the science has related to them. And I mean, for me, Lauren, it's always great to, it's like I was explaining this to a client the other day. It's like I have the best seat in the house when I'm working with a client
Hmm.
and I'm actually able to see them change and see them transform. And they've had whatever issue it is for years and years and years, and they're able to transform within 2, 3, 4, 5 sessions, and they're just like, I don't understand, like how did I have this for 10 years or a decade or more, and in only a couple short sessions
Oh,
I'm able to make this change. And it's like, for me, when I'm sitting there and I'm working with someone, all right, and it's always a collaborative approach between myself and the client,
mhm.
right? It's always an experience between the two of us. I always call it a delicate dance, but it's always a pleasant thing for me to experience, because it's like you take someone who comes in and they have an issue, they believe in themselves, but they have this issue, and you're able to help them through hypnosis. They understand their own true personal power, and it's like they transform into this wonderful person, this better version of themselves. And it's through the relatable science and it's through the inner workings of how the brain operates that
Well,
all this is done. And again, through the power of hypnosis, it's such a beautiful thing.
yeah, we have a beautiful privilege of those seats that we're in. But I love coming at it from the angle of science because hypnotism for most people, I mean, I think this is our mission, and we're picking up that momentum so people are understanding hypnotism is not a mystical, made up placebo only thing. Like, it is real. You can find real case studies about hypnotism. We just don't know everything about the mind yet because we use our mind to assess our mind, and hypnotism is a way of the mind helping shift the story at the biological level, at the psychological level. Yeah, we're just holding, to my opinion, Troy, the awareness on a person to support them or encourage them or direct them to shift. But they're shifting, and we just get to sit and watch it. And it really is exciting. I love it. I wanted to ask you a question about hypnotism. What thing is the most interesting to you that hypnotism can work with? And let's think about, because I'm looking at a bunch of case studies right now because I really want people to understand how accessible the science is to find validated um, case journal studies on hypnosis. What's the most interesting thing for you?
Well, it's funny because my most interesting thing is always what's in the best interest of my client.
No.
So maybe that's a cheesy way to slide out of that answer, but it's the honest truth. Because
Yeah.
if somebody comes to me, right? I mean, I work with a lot of people that have anxiety, right? So anxiety is something where someone can understand their own empowerment. They can understand through the power of hypnosis, they can understand just how truly powerful they are, just how they can stop their brain from going back down that old road of anxiousness or fear or worry or uncertainty or whatever it might be, right?
Mhm.
So, somebody comes to me for weight loss, or somebody comes to me for smoking cessation, somebody comes to me for anxiety. That's always my best interest, because just because I've worked with someone, on a Monday with anxiety, for example, it doesn't mean the person that comes to me on Wednesday with anxiety is going to be treated and dealt with in the same way. Does that make sense? Because the
100%.
person on Wednesday may have a different goal in overcoming their anxiety than the person on Monday. And
Yeah.
that's what I love about you know, my job. I mean, that's what I love about this profession. That's what I love about my practice, is that it always allows me to stay on my toes. Because I could have 20 different people come to me for, anxiety, but the way that you go about helping each of those 20 is going to be vastly different.
Hmm. Yep.
But a good tool that we should make mention of here is that a good tool, if somebody wants to understand the science behind hypnosis and how it can help, they can simply go to Google Scholar. And it's really simple. You just go on Google Scholar and you can simply say hypnosis and whatever the issue is, right? So hypnosis and anxiety, hypnosis and weight loss, hypnosis and whatever it is. And there will be a whole bunch of documents, right? And scientific studies and research papers that come up discussing and talking about the relevancy of hypnosis and whatever the issue is. So, I mean, it's something that's been well researched, right? I don't know if it's in the mainstream, but it's been well researched. People understand, like you mentioned, Lauren, the placebo. People understand the exactly, how hypnosis is able to help. And it's just, I don't know. It's one of those things where, and we talk about this all the time. It's like, why aren't more people knowing that this is a viable option for them? And that's one reason why we started Co-Creation Nation podcast.
I don't think they know that it's a medical potential. Even though there are a ton of medical hypnosis books, and hypnosis actually started, as medical and therapy, and it's only just the past couple hundred years it's been a stage thing. But I think people, when they consider getting help, for whatever goal, it doesn't have to be like a recovery sort of thing. We're talking to most of the things we've talked about so far are, to my definition, the under the threshold things. When you get to the threshold and you continue to flourish instead of survive, sports development, better focus skills, even interpersonal relationship skills. Hypnotism is the mind, and the mind is the paradigm for all things. So people probably know or consider that. There might be some people who have the resistance that their mind might be broken, and so they need somebody to fix their mind. But it's the mind is really advanced, and it's just the stories that we've been rehearsing in the mind because of whatever event or restriction or external influencing, right? Nature versus nurture. It doesn't matter what's gotten you to where you are. I want people to consider hypnotism, at least just consider it.
Well, it's funny because I was on Google Scholar the other day, and I found this really great study out of Harvard, which I wanted to mention here because, again, talking about the power of the mind, right? Now, this study out of Harvard took two groups of volunteers who were practicing a specific piano exercise, right? And at the end of the study, the volunteers showed an increase in the neuronal growth, right? The neurons in their brain. So I don't know if, I mean, for someone who may not know, right? If you do something with repetition, it can be, I mean, in this case, it was playing an instrument, right? But it could be having a specific thought. It could be, playing a specific sport, whatever it might be, right? You're growing clusters, you're growing neural clusters in the brain that are remembering those specific actions. Yeah. So like if you're playing an instrument, for example, your brain is remembering all, like I used to play back when I was little, I used to play the violin. I don't know if I ever told you that, but I used to play the violin when I was really young. So when I was learning to play, my brain is making these neural pathways and these neural clusters, which are allowing my brain to remember all of the notes and where to put my fingers on the strings and everything like that, right? But in this specific study out of Harvard, during the duration of the study, the volunteers, their brains, they created more cells and more neural pathways. Now, what's interesting is that one of the groups, so one out of the two groups of these volunteers, practiced playing the piano only in their imagination.
Nice.
In other words, they never laid a finger on the piano. Mm-hmm. Right? And this group that never even touched the piano, they achieved results that were similar to the volunteers who had physically practiced on the real pianos. Yeah. Right? So it was the practice of the visualization itself. This is what the study concluded, which caused their brains to grow and adapt. And I was reading this and I was like, well, this is just another one of these studies. Again, this one's out of Harvard, that proves that the brain wires in imagined activity in the same way that it wires in actual physical activity. Okay. And if you think about it, physical, elite athletes do this all the time. I mean, they know something because they visualize before the big game, right? So they have this ability, just like we all have this ability. And that's why hypnosis works so well, because we're accessing and changing these subconscious programs. And it's amazing.
So I heard one like that. I hadn't heard this about violin playing from Harvard, because I'm surprised that the subject group that only used their mind was on par. What I had heard about the basketball team that practiced that same, they had a control group and a group that only visualized. And the group that only visualized, when they got back on the court and each of them, were practicing, had gotten better at free throws because that's what they were imagining themselves doing. Because in our imagination, you're probably going to imagine yourself doing it amazingly, or at least you're privileged to do that, so why not? This can come a little bit to the ego strengthening. Can you imagine a story where you are allowing everything that you really want to happen?
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, there are so many studies out there, Troy, and I love that you said, what is it, Google Scholar?
Google Scholar is a really great resource for anyone who's interested. Yeah, I mean, you can find anything on Google Scholar. I mean, but there's a ton of stuff on hypnosis.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So you go to that domain, and then you type in hypnosis and
That'll
visualization.
probably be the easiest way to do it. Yeah. So if someone is looking to see what the efficacy of, what hypnosis and how hypnosis can help with anxiety, for example, they would go on Google Scholar and just say hypnosis and anxiety. If
Mhm.
it's fear, hypnosis and fear. If it's weight loss, hypnosis and weight loss. You get the idea.
Yeah. So you didn't ask my question back to me, which is okay, but I'm going to answer my question about what thing was the most interesting. It's hard to pick, but
Well, you got
allergy.
to give me a second, Lauren. I was going to ask you, but now that you mentioned it,
Wait. Well, it's because when we talk about what's potential, there's so many different directions that we can take it in, and the science angle um, is a pointed category because I know so much of the podcast is about the stories and about the takeaway techniques. But to me, the science is so interesting. And when I found out about allergies, not just like seasonal allergies, with which Martha Stewart had talked about, she used hypnosis for her seasonal allergies, but anaphylactic allergies. Like when I heard about that, I thought that is so interesting
Mhm.
because we probably have this belief, or I do, that that we're born with certain individual traits, and some people's individual traits may make them more allergic to whatever, dairy, nuts, something like that. But through their mind, they could change that story, even though it's been a story their entire life. It just speaks to the potential. um, I've worked with some people. I want to work with more people for that, just to get my own like hands-on case studies.
Well, I mean, and that's a good point. I mean, people, I don't think most people understand how their mind works, how their brain works, but this is exactly how our brain is designed to work. Your brain, it doesn't care if you're installing good habits or bad habits. Your brain just learns. So the fact that, somebody can come to me, for example, or come to you and they've had an issue for 15 years, a lot of people think they need another 15 just to get back to some sort of normal or neutral baseline. But that's not how it works, because that's not how the brain is designed to work. You have to understand that your brain grows and changes based upon the feedback that you provide it, right? That means that what you tell your brain, good or bad, doesn't matter because your brain doesn't care, changes it, right? So as your brain rewires itself to these changes, your brain then feeds these new neural programs and images and words and thoughts and attitudes and beliefs back into you into with what's called a neural feedback loop. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Yep.
So we're always communicating with our brain. We just don't know that we are. So if you're communicating to your brain, oh, I have this anxiety, I have this anxiousness, I have this fear, I have this whatever, right? This is the stuff that's going to come back to you because this is what your brain is learning. And we were just talking about this before we hopped on, right? The perspective, for example, of certain people in the world, if they have a negative outlook, if they have a pessimistic outlook, guess what? Their neural feedback loop is feeding that right back into them. Again, through their thoughts and words and attitudes and visualizations and images and beliefs and all that. But if somebody goes out into the world and has a positive outlook, right? Guess what? Their neural feedback is providing them all the positive things. So it comes down to a choice. But understand that it becomes a choice only when someone becomes empowered enough to know exactly how to change their emotional state. And that's what I love about these practices, your practice and my practice, because somebody can come in and they can learn hypnosis and they can learn to change their brain and learn how to change emotional states. And that is true power.
I love it's well, it's so empowering, and it's so much more than positive thinking,
Mhm.
because I think this is
Absolutely.
where people might hear some things that we say and think, oh, that's sensational. They're talking about affirmations or something like that. We're talking about what affirmations stand for, which is an opportunity to interact with your brain in real time and make those neuro adjustments, because your brain never stops learning. I think some people might think, oh, I've reached some certain age, so my brain is done. I can't change it. Your brain continues to change up until the moment you are not alive. So
Mhm.
if you are alive and listening, we hope that you're hearing this and enjoying this. And let us know when you go onto googlescholar.com what you found that was most interesting. If you are a skeptic and you want to come on and be interviewed and talk with me and Troy in real time, we're certainly open to that. If you've had experiences with hypnosis, we would love to interview you. We bring on our clients, we bring on other people in the alternative human services professions. So yeah, so happy to be doing this with you, Troy, and bringing the message of hypnotism out
Hey,
into.
it's my pleasure. And for those of you listening, we love each and every one of you. Make sure you head on over to our website, hypnosisinaction.com. Make sure you get your free hypnosis downloads. Lauren has one, I have one. And make sure you also connect with us over on Facebook at Co-Creation Nation. We love to hear your feedback as to what you would like us to cover next in upcoming episodes. Lauren, as always, it's been my pleasure, and
Yeah.
we will see you in the next podcast.
Love doing this with you, Troy. Talk to you guys soon. Bye, Team Nation.